Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing good and I hope you guys are doing well. I know it has been a minute. I've kind of been a little bit MIA. There's been a lot that's been happening. Yeah, so I've received quite a few messages from some of you guys. Some of you guys have had your visas approved, so congratulations, that is great news. Some of you have been asking me for like some advice and some tips on like things that I wish I'd known before I moved, maybe things that I would have done differently, or maybe any advice that I can give you guys if you guys are looking to move, or if you're still in the planning stages, or if you are in the process of moving. So what I've done is I have put together a list of things that not necessarily that I would have done differently, but just some of the things that I have found helpful since I've moved. Okay, so the first bit of advice that I got before I left was don't come back to the UK for at least 6 months. And the example that the person gave me was of their sister. So their sister had moved from the Caribbean to London, but was constantly going back and forth. And what happened was that they were never really able to settle in London because they found it really difficult to detach from home. And what like contributed to that inability to detach was constantly going back and forth. I also spoke to a few of my other friends who have moved here from London, and they basically said the same thing. They were like, don't go home too often. It's tempting, you're gonna wanna go home, you're gonna wanna see everyone. But if you really want to be intentional about like creating a life here, especially in the first year, then try to go home like for minimal times as possible. And so I really took that advice on board, and the first time I went home was actually last month. So I went home for 2 weeks, which was incredible. But I think if I'd have gone home sooner, I think it would have been a lot harder when I would have left. So when I first moved here, and I've spoken to you guys about this before, but I had like really bad homesickness, and it didn't help that like I think 2.5 weeks after moving it was my birthday, so I was like really depressed. I was single, I was just like, it was just like a hot mess. So I started making plans to come home at Christmas. But then after speaking to a few people and after just kind of remembering the advice that I'd got, I decided to stick to my plans of coming home in April, which by that time was just over 6 months. So when you're starting from scratch, there is a huge temptation to constantly want to go home. But if you really want to be intentional about creating a life here, building a life here, I would say try not to go home for at least the first 6 months. The second piece of advice that I got was that wherever you get invited to, just go. So thankfully I was introduced to a few people when I got here, so I just made a decision that anywhere that I was invited to, obviously within reason and within my boundaries, but anywhere that was reasonable for me to be invited to, then I would go. Like as long as it didn't conflict with any of my personal convictions, then I was going. As an introvert, there is a tendency for me to just want to stay in my apartment, you know, shut myself out from everyone, because this is my comfort. Like I love being at home, I love being in my apartment, it's my peace, it's like my place of tranquility. However, again, being an expat, being an immigrant, being in a new place, I've had to really be intentional about going out. And if somebody invites me somewhere, then going, even if it's just grabbing a coffee with someone, or I don't know, going for a walk, going for a hike, like doing something. Because again, I'm trying to build my life here. I'm trying to build new relationships. I'm trying to start new foundations, etc. So that's another piece of advice I'd give you, is that if people invite you to places once you've moved, just go. Like be free, have fun, go to barbecues, cookouts, whatever it is you've been invited to, like go. And like I said, as an introvert, it can be really hard for me to do that. So I've had to learn to try to be more extroverted. And sometimes that means going to places where I literally don't know anyone. And as an introvert, if you're an introvert as well, you know that that is just like, yeah, the worst. But like if I'm gonna really do this, and if I'm gonna do this well, then part of that means just stepping out of my comfort zone and finding myself in places that I wouldn't usually go to in order to start building friendships and foundations. Okay, the third thing I would say is try to, and this is one of the things that I did when I moved here, I tried to get all of my admin stuff done like straight away. So whether that was opening a bank account, whether that was signing up to doctors, whether that was finding a dentist, whether that was sorting out my driving license. I've had a UK license for 12 years. They did not care about that here. So this can differ between state to state, but from a North Carolina perspective, like they did not care about my UK license. And so I did a bit of research before I moved to the US. So I spoke to like the DMV, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles for North Carolina, got some advice, had a look on their website, found out what I needed to do. And because the appointments are quite scarce, I booked it as soon as I got here. I think I booked my driving test, and there was like a 2-month wait. So if you do want to drive, and if you are moving to a driving state, then I would say like try to get all of that stuff in order before you get here. In terms of opening a current account, or as they call it, a checking account, that was quite hard for me because I didn't have a social security number, I didn't have any US ID because I didn't yet have a driver's license. So I had to get a verification letter from my employer, which basically like verified my identity, my date of birth, and the address that I was staying at the time. That took a while to get through. I think it probably took about 2 weeks for me to open an account. So yeah, again, try and get that sorted in your first few days of getting here. Another admin is your phone. So you're obviously going to need a phone when you get here. So again, because I didn't have a social security number when I arrived, because I didn't have any ID, I couldn't take out a contract. So I had to get pay as you go. Like it's 19.99. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still on pay as you go because it works for me. So every month I top up $50 a month, and then I get unlimited calls, data, text, whatever, with T-Mobile if you're interested. But yeah, so I would say like just get your phone stuff sorted, and once you start to once you get a social security number and you start to build up your credit score, then you can get like a contracted phone. Another thing I would say is sort out your finances before you come. So if you have a UK current account, like the majority of the time, probably all the time, they're gonna tell you that you can't continue to maintain that account whilst you're living here, because you're considered, even though you're a UK citizen, you're no longer a UK resident for tax purposes. So you may want to think about how that's going to work. If you do have money over there, how you're going to transfer it here. Sometimes there are fees, and that's one side note. Like when it comes to banking, like the US are so advanced in so many areas, but when it comes to banking, bruh, like, you know how we are in London, we all use our Apple Pay everywhere. We're like dinging, dinging, dinging everywhere, contactless everywhere. Here, like they don't, I would say like I can use my Apple Pay maybe like 40% of the time, 50% at a push. And the other day I went to the supermarket and I was like trying to pay for something with my phone, and the girl was looking at me and she was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm trying to pay. She was like, no, we don't have that here. And I was like, really? Anyway, so yeah, so you may just want to think about like, so that's just one thing to know. But yeah, you may just want to think about how you're going to transfer money when you move, because there are like wire fees, transfer fees, all of that kind of stuff. So have a think before you move, like how are you going to be able to like get your money from the UK to the US, or back from the US to the UK, etc, etc, and because there can be some transfer fees involved. So you may want to just start looking at like the types of accounts that you can have and make international payments for minimum fees, whether that's PayPal, Revolut, or something else. Another thing in terms of admin, get your social security number sorted ASAP. So thankfully for me, obviously, because I moved with my company, they were able to like give me a lot of this information. But yeah, I still had to find where the Social Security Administration office was in North Carolina. I still had to make an appointment with them. I still had to go. It was a very ghetto experience, but we moved. But get that sorted ASAP, because once you get your social security number, you can really just start to build up your credit. Then speaking on the whole credit thing, so one of the things that I was shocked about, so even though I built up credit, even though like I had credit cards and stuff in the UK, like none of that transposed to the US. So I've had some questions before. People are like, if I take out like a credit card of a US company whilst I'm still in the UK, can I build up credit? So I don't think it works that way, and the reason why is because your credit is associated with your social security number. So if you don't yet have a social security number and you aren't taking out any loans or any type of payments against that SSN, then you're not really building credit. So you can have that card in the UK, but it's not associated with a social security number. So for example, to get a car, so thankfully my company because they have so many expats, they now like have a particular company that they work with, like an automobile company that basically helps expats get a car. And so I went through that company, so I was able to use like my UK driver's license, I was able to use like my UK credit history in order to get the car. However, if I hadn't have had that, then I would have had to have bought a car outright when I got here, and on top of all the fees that it cost me to move here, that just would not have been feasible. So that's just one thing to note, is that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get credit when you don't have any credit history here. Like, yeah. So I even had to pay, like when I got my apartment, like again, they were able to see my visa, they got a letter of my contract, they could see how much I was getting paid and all of that stuff. So I was able to get my apartment, but I had to pay a bigger deposit than I would have done if I would have been able to have like had a credit score before that. So yeah, once you move here, start getting that credit up. It does take a while. Like I literally just got approved for a credit card. You don't even want to know how much the limit is. It's embarrassing. I mean, like in the UK, I think my credit card limit was £9,000. My credit limit here is $300. I mean, what can I even do with $300? That is like 2 grocery shops. But anyway, but again, start small and then I can obviously work my way up. Get that social security number as soon as you can and start thinking about ways to build your credit. And the next thing I'd say is taxes. So I was always aware that you would have to file taxes as a person working in the US. But I guess I didn't know like the depths that you would have to go into. So thankfully I work, as you guys know, I work in consulting. So we actually have tax advisors in-house. So I was able to get my taxes done through work. I did have to pay a small fee. I think it was, I want to say like $99 or something. But they did do all my taxes for me. However, I did have to provide them with all the information and that was long. So just be prepared that when it comes to filing your taxes, which you do here typically between like January and like April, I think the deadline's like the end of April or maybe like mid-April. You know what, don't even quote me on that. But I started mine in January. I had to provide like any UK current accounts that I'd had over the year, any interest that I'd earned, like anything like that. And just speaking on that, I also had to provide interest earned on like stocks and shares ISAs. So if you do have a stocks and shares ISA, I would also say check with your provider before you move to find out whether you can continue to pay into the ISA or whether there's a limit, whether you need to close it down. And you also may have to switch out of certain funds. So I think I had to switch out from some of my UK funds, I believe, but I can't remember. But there was something that I needed to do because it was a UK UCITS and I couldn't hold a UK UCITS as a US resident. Even though I'm not a permanent resident, I wasn't allowed to hold certain funds in my stocks and shares ISA. So yeah, definitely check with, if you do have a stocks and shares ISA, definitely check with your provider on the investments that you're allowed to hold and whether you can continue holding them, whether you can continue investing into them. So yeah, you want to kind of like get all that stuff sorted before you get here. And the last thing that I would say is be prepared for the US work culture. So if you are coming to work in corporate America, ciao. Like be prepared that these people grind, honey, okay? Like they grind, like they work so hard here. And yeah, they work hard here. They work longer hours. They don't really take vacation. For me, thankfully, my company actually does offer unlimited vacation, but I know like a few of my other friends who live here, they only get like 10 days a year. And coming from Europe, like that is wild to us. Because in Europe, we get like 25 days, sometimes 30 days, depending on how long you've been with the company. And even if people take vacation here, so even if like, you know, they take a week and they like go somewhere like Miami or I don't know, Utah, a lot of the time they'll still be working, which is wild. Because you know how we do it in Europe. Like when we're on vacation, like we're on vacation, okay? Like everything is shut off. Don't contact us, don't text us, don't talk to us, bye. Whereas here it's kind of like you're kind of expected to be available. I mean, I say available, like you're expected to at least be reachable if needed. So yeah, the work-life balance culture here is very different to Europe. So I would say just prepare yourself for that. Prepare yourself to work longer hours. You do get paid more, so hallelujah, because there is compensation for the work that you're doing. But when people told me that, they were like, oh, they work like crazy over there, I was like, okay. They weren't like it. That has definitely taken a lot for me to get used to, is like the working culture here. Is very interesting. Yeah, but yeah, so guys, I hope you found this video helpful. Also, if you do want to follow more of my journey, feel free to follow me on Instagram. Feel free to reach out to me. Anything that you have any questions about, anything that you think will be helpful for me to cover in another video, then please feel free to do that. But yeah guys, as always, if you like my content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys soon.